President Trump is reportedly considering restricting temporary guest workers from entering the United States in the midst of the worst economic crisis since the Great Depression. Now, this is something that you would expect to become a cause célèbre of the left. No, instead, it's the corporate right, which is outraged by this. 9 Republican senators, including Senators Graham, Cornyn, Crapo, Risch, Rounds, Young, Murkowski, Sullivan, and Lankford, all write President Trump, urging him not to restrict temporary work-based visas, which they will help economic recovery. Now, the types of visas that they're advocating for, keeping here, are called H-2B and H-2A visas. Now, H-2B is non-agricultural temporary guest workers. H-2A are temporary agricultural workers. There is literally no reason for this visa to exist other than to help the bottom line of corporate America.
So this is the guest worker program, and part of what's interesting about this program is that it is opposed in certain ways by both the nationalist right and the left,
right.
Because labor unions have long opposed this program because it's very exploitative of the workers.
Yeah. They get paid terrible wages.
Get paid terribly, and you have no ability to unionize, which is the only way that workers really have any modicum of power in this country. So that's why this particular program is of interest. Yes. And there was an interesting development last night.
There was an amazing development last night, something that I have not yet seen. Tucker Carlson reacting to this, saying every single one of those senators, he is rooting for their failure and they should be primaried. Let's take a listen to what he said.
So at this point, we want to be clear about something. Not all of these 9 senators are bad people. We know and even like some of them. Lankford, for example, nice guy. But we are fervently rooting for their defeat anyway. We are hoping that the next Republican primary, all 9 of the people you're looking at right now will be defeated and replaced by people who care about unemployed Americans. That is the very least we can expect, and in fact, we should demand it.
Pretty dramatic.
Very dramatic. That has not happened as far as I know. I mean, he's come out against Richard Burr, obviously, but these are all hard, red, even safe Republican seats. It's very much the same as the Justice Democrats mentality. That's why I wanted to highlight for everybody here, which is that what Tucker understands is that in these hard red places, is that if these places, which are the bastions of Republican orthodoxy and all of that, become overtaken by corporate-friendly politics, then you have no ability for the base and the actual wants and needs of the Republican Party to actually get what they deserve whenever it comes to legislating in Congress. This is one of the most, this letter is naked corporate advocacy, because there is just no justification for it, which is that in the worst economic crisis since the Great Depression, 40 million unemployed Americans, a time when we need better wages more than ever, these Republican senators are advocating for bringing in cheap foreign labor in order to undercut an American wage. There is just no other way of looking at it. The reason that these corporations want these visas to be able to be issued is so they don't have to pay actual American citizens a higher wage. That's it. That's literally the only reason.
Well, and obviously my views on immigration are quite different from
all the
yours.
From the left.
No, it's true though. It's quite different from yours. Quite different from Tucker's. Let's be clear about that. But one thing that is true is that the immigration system we have designed has been designed by corporate actors.
Yes.
Has been designed to punish foreign workers and American workers and do the bidding of foreign of international multinational companies. That is who essentially writes the law, dictates the way that it works. That's why we're always focused on the individual actors, the workers themselves, rather than ever having any corporate culpability for when they are breaking our immigration laws. That is never discussed. That never happens.
Oh, never, right? They never pay a fine for nothing.
And so I think it is important for people to understand that sort of higher level of that's how we end up with the immigration laws that we have, and that's how you end up with a situation that is bad for American workers and bad for foreign workers, like this guest worker program is really a prime example of exactly that. Question for you on this. Tucker obviously is an influential voice on the right. Do you think that this will just be sort of like one night segment, or do you think that there would actually be some movement and some desire to primary any of these individuals this cycle or going forward?
So it's certainly possible. I guess always the issue is money, is that on the right in particular, the access to capital that these 9 senators that we just put up there is so immense that it's almost hard to understand. millions and millions of dollars in their campaign accounts that they barely have to do any. I mean, this letter alone will net them millions each.
Libertarianism is the best funded ideology in the country.
Right,
for
because
sure.
it helps a very select group of billionaire donors who have immense power in the Republican Party, not just whenever it comes to the think tank class, to the donors. I mean, who do you think all these failed campaign operatives go work for whenever they're out of work? Some stupid PAC that does X, advocates for Y. It's all funded by exactly the same, like 5 to 10 people. So in terms, it's not the same as with the left. Is that you can get an organic thing going, but you're going to get outshot by more than a 10 to 20 to 1 margin in places like this. And the only time it was tried, I have to be honest, was clownishly by people like Steve Bannon in the Alabama Senate race, backing Roy Moore. That we have to be honest.
Not a great choice.
It was a clownish effort, didn't have all that much money behind it, didn't have the actual intellectual underpinning. And so from my perspective, why I'm very encouraged by what Tucker is doing is that you need the voices out there. Let's think about how the Justice Democrats themselves came to be an organization. It was like Cenk and Kyle, right? Like Cenk and Kyle and a bunch of bomb throwers online who were like, hey, we got to do something. It took a long time for it to actually become the entity that it is. It hasn't been all that successful. But on the right, it's going to take the same level of impetus. And I would say that I'm not saying this is not going to spark a movement.
Is there the same level of, because I think this is what you're getting at in terms of the funding, because I don't think you have to be on par funding-wise to be able to compete. You have to have sufficient funds, but you don't have to actually exceed because money only gets you so much, as we saw in the Democratic primary as one example, or with President Trump's election against Hillary Clinton as another example. Is there a less developed sort of grassroots online fundraising base on the right, though, versus the left?
Well, so yes and no. So it can, like I said, it can be done. Successful example is somebody like Dave Bratt, who primaried Eric Cantor, the House leader, based purely on the issue of immigration. But that was also 2010. People were particularly fired up.
Cantor was caught sleeping.
Cantor was caught sleeping. It's very difficult to do. And the other issue is that on the right, there are not the same, I would say, like levels of independent media, so to speak, independent channels, their voice. People are still trying to figure it out. And I would say Tucker is about as clear
as voice. It's an older base.
As it gets, and that's the other issue.
And so there's less of that sort of online influence.
So how are you supposed to break through if you can't go on Fox News, let's say, and if you're challenging somebody? How are you supposed to break through if you can't go on Rush Limbaugh or if you can't go on Hannity's radio show? It's extraordinarily difficult. And the other thing is the media, which is that the media is progressively left on social issues. So anybody who, like Marie Newman, she's going to get all the glowing profiles that she would ever want. That's never going to come at you. They're actually actively going to hate you even more than they hate corporate Republicans. So the built-in structural advantage for people on the left is not really there for the right. So it will take, I would say, not the same amount of money. You're always going to get outspent. But more what it was going to take is organizing and independent channels in order to reach kind of the broader audience and more sympathetic people that are out there. I think that's step one to anything like this happening. So it's just much more difficult, I think, for it to actually happen because it's so much more controlled by big moneyed interests.
Yeah. Interesting. Very interesting
there you go.
development.
All right, we'll have more Rising for you right after this.